All right, let's jump right in, folks. Today's deep dive, it's a doozy. It's going to be all about the upcoming trial of Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, this case, it's got it all.
Oh, it does. We're talking racketeering. We've got sex trafficking, kidnapping, forced labor, bribery, the whole nine yards. We've got court filings galore.
You know what's crazy? Combs, he's actually pushing for this super speedy trial. Like, really speedy. May 5th, 2025, that's the date. Barely 8 months after they arrested him back in September 2024.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see that every day. A defendant wants to, rush to court. Gotta make you wonder, right? What's the angle here? Is this, some high-stakes gamble, or is there some kind of legal genius we're missing? Help us out here.
Okay, so we've got to break down this whole speedy trial thing. See, it's right there in the Sixth Amendment. This amendment, it's all about protecting defendants from these crazy delays that can happen.
So it's not just, wanting to get it over with, right? There's some serious legal backing for why Combs is let's go, let's do this.
Exactly. But there is, a huge practical side to this whole thing, too. I
All
mean,
right.
right now, Combs is sitting in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, which, let's be honest, is not exactly a luxury resort. So a speedy trial could be
Yeah.
his ticket out of there. Fast.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Plus, I imagine it, puts a ton of pressure on the prosecution, right? To get their ducks in a row, pronto. Talk about a time crunch.
That's exactly it. And the prosecution, they're pushing back hard. They're saying, look, this case, it is complex. Mountains of evidence. They're worried that if they have to, reveal everything too early, it could actually end up hurting their case, especially if any of those pre-trial motions, change the charges or what evidence they can even use.
So it's this, back and forth, right? This legal tug of war. They're each trying to control the pace, control the flow of information.
That's what's happening. And those court filings we talked about, that's where it gets juicy. You can see exactly what they're disagreeing on, like these flashpoints driving the whole battle.
Yeah. All right, you've got my attention. Let's dive into the details here. What exactly are they fighting over? Give it to us.
So one of the big ones is this document they're calling the Enterprise Letter. Think of it like the prosecution's master plan. It lays out their whole case for this alleged criminal enterprise, specifics about the alleged acts, the dates, times, places, who was involved. It's like their blueprint.
And I understand Combs' attorneys are saying they're basically in the dark. They need that info, yesterday, if they're going to prepare their defense.
Right. They're saying without that level of detail, it's like, how can we fight this? We're fighting a shadow. But the prosecution's argument is that they want to hold back, wait till closer to trial. Their reasoning is that those pretrial rulings from the judge could seriously change the whole scope of the case and what they can even present as evidence.
So they're playing it close to the vest, huh? Waiting till the rules of the game are set in stone.
Exactly, exactly. And this whole tension, we see it again with the expert witnesses.
Mhm.
Both sides, they need time to vet the other side's experts, maybe prepare to challenge them, but it's become a little bit of a game of chicken. Combs' team, they want the prosecution to show their cards first, reveal those expert witnesses before they reveal their own.
Strategic move. See what you're up against before you make your next move. It's all about that edge, isn't it?
Absolutely, that edge. And then there's this thing called 404B 413 notice, which this deals with evidence of, like, any past bad acts, any other sexual assault allegations.
Oh, now this is where we get into that true crime territory, right? You start to wonder, is the prosecution going to pull out some shocking, damaging information from Combs' past, trying to paint a picture?
It's possible. I mean, imagine they want to show Combs as someone with this pattern of behavior. That's where this notice comes in. They could potentially bring up past incidents, but there are safeguards. They can't just throw this stuff around. The prosecution has to prove it's relevant to this case and that it's admissible, under the rules of evidence.
So even though this kind of evidence, it could be powerful, it's not a guaranteed win for the prosecution. The judge still has to decide, is it fair game?
You got it. And then we've got these things called motions in limine. These are basically legal tactics where each side tries to get certain evidence or even whole arguments excluded from the trial completely. It's like they're trying to, I don't know, carefully choose what the jury gets to see, what they hear.
Yeah.
Huge impact, obviously.
It's almost like each side is trying to write their own version of the story that the jury is going to hear. Right?
That's a great way to put it. And then you have the 3,500 material,
Yeah.
which is all about the statements and reports from, the government witnesses.
And this is where things get a little extra interesting, yeah, because the defense is saying, The prosecution might be holding back some evidence that could help Combs, especially when it comes to this victim one, which we think is Cassandra Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend.
Right, you remember, Ventura's lawsuit back in 2023, that's kind of what kicked this whole thing off. The defense, they're working hard to make her look less credible. And they're saying the prosecution might be downplaying evidence that actually weakens their case.
Trying to poke holes in the prosecution's story, trying to make us question their motives.
Exactly. And last but not least, we have the witness and exhibit lists, which lay out, who's going to testify and what evidence is going to be presented. The prosecution, they want to wait till 3 weeks before the trial to hand over their list. They say it wouldn't make sense to do it sooner, not until the judge has ruled on those motions to exclude evidence. The defense, they've agreed to this timeline.
So there's like a little bit of common ground amongst all this back and forth.
There is. It's worth noting that both sides, they've also agreed on the deadlines for the jury questionnaire, how they're going to pick the jury, when they'll submit those proposed verdict forms. All crucial steps.
Okay, so we're moving, right? Warp speed, just like Combs wants. But with all this, disagreement about these pretrial disclosures, is this May 5th trial date, is it even realistic? What do you think?
That is the million-dollar question. It's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
Because, this case is complex. This whole tug-of-war between the prosecution and defense, it could easily lead to, postponements.
So even with Combs pushing for speed, things could still get, derailed, since, we've got to be ready for anything.
Oh, absolutely. And there's another wrinkle here. They call it a superseding indictment, which basically means the prosecution could bring new charges or even amend the old ones. And that could, throw the whole timeline out the window.
So much for speedy, right? Sounds like there's a lot more to unpack here. We started with this basic, what's a speedy trial? Now we're deep in the weeds of these pretrial disclosures, all the strategies. Man, I am hooked on this. But before we jump ahead, let's break down what this all means for Sean Diddy Combs, his chances in court. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each side's approach? We'll get into all that right after this.
I mean, it is, right? It's just fascinating. And this whole thing, it really makes you think about, how do we balance a defendant's right to a speedy trial with the prosecution's need to really prepare, especially with a case this big?
You're right. You're right. It does feel like Combs is kind of trying to use this speedy trial thing to his advantage, maybe catch the prosecution off guard, force them to show their hand on those disclosures earlier than they'd like. What do you think? Am I off base here?
I mean, it's definitely one way to look at it, but it's risky, right? It's a gamble. Because what if the prosecution convinces the judge, hey, we need more time? Combs could end up stuck in detention even longer while they build their case.
It's like heads I win, tails I lose, kind of. He's hoping the pressure of the speedy trial helps him, but it could totally backfire.
And we're talking some seriously serious charges here.
No doubt. If Combs is convicted, we could be talking, a lot of time. A lot of prison time.
Okay, so what are the experts saying? What are the odds? Does he have a chance?
It's early. We got to be careful about predictions and all that. But, analysts are pointing to a few things, key factors that could really sway the jury.
All right, lay it on me. What should we be watching for, as this thing plays out?
First off, how strong is the prosecution's case, right? They've got to have solid evidence for these charges, the racketeering, the sex trafficking, all of it.
And that all comes back to, that enterprise letter, what the witnesses say, anything from Combs' past they can use, right?
Exactly. And the defense is going to be fighting tooth and nail to, throw that evidence out. They'll be looking for any holes, any inconsistencies in the prosecution's story. They're going to try to create that, reasonable doubt. It's like this big chess match, right? Each side trying to guess what the other one's going to do.
Great analogy. And then there's the judge, right? Judge Subramanian. They have a huge role to play in all this.
Oh, yeah, right. They got to rule on all those pretrial motions, manage that whole disclosure process, make sure everything's fair, big responsibility.
Big time. And Subramanian is known to be, tough but fair. Runs a tight courtroom, doesn't let either side get away with anything.
So how do you think they're going to handle this, right? Combs wants speed, prosecution's saying, hold up, it's complicated. Do they lean toward Combs' right to a speedy trial? Or did they give the prosecution some breathing room?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And whatever they decide, it's going to have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Big time.
So we've got the evidence itself, the legal strategy, the judge. Anything else we got to keep our eyes on? This is a legal drama after all.
Well, public perception. Can't forget about that, especially in a case like this. Combs, he's a big name. This whole thing, it's everywhere.
Oh, yeah, all over the news, social media. And these charges, man, people are going to have opinions. You got to wonder, could it even affect the jury?
It's a concern. Jury selection, that's going to be like a crucial moment in this trial. Both sides, they're going to be looking for jurors who can, put aside any preconceived notions about Combs and just judge based on what they hear in court.
Easier said than done, right? Finding those truly impartial people,
Yeah.
especially when it's this public. And then you've got Combs himself, right? The guy's charismatic. He knows how to work a camera.
For sure. How he presents himself in court, that could influence the jury too. It could influence their whole perception of him, which, could affect the verdict.
It's almost like he's giving a performance, and the stakes, they don't get higher than this. So let me get this straight. We've got the evidence, the legal arguments, the judge, what the public thinks of Combs, and how Combs acts in court. That's a lot of factors.
You got it. It reminds us that, even with all the law stuff, this is about, justice,
Yep.
holding someone accountable for what they allegedly did.
It's a big deal for the legal system, and for the jury, they're the ones who ultimately decide guilty or not guilty.
I agree completely. And, this story, we're just at the beginning. Lots more to come.
All right, so this deep dive, it's been intense, right? We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
From Combs' legal strategy to the bigger picture of how the legal system works. But before we move on, I want to talk about why this case, it should matter to you, to our listeners. It's easy to get caught up in the, celebrity trial drama, but what are the takeaways here? Why should we care about this beyond the headlines? We'll get into that right after this. Okay, so we found deep, right? Combs' legal battle, the speedy trial, those disclosures, the whole back and forth. But let's zoom out for a second. What does this all mean, for the average person, for our listeners? Why should we care about this beyond the headlines and the fact that it's Diddy?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I think there are a couple of layers to it. On one hand, this case, it's like a spotlight on the power dynamics you see in the legal system, right? Combs, he's got money, he's got resources, he can put together this top-tier defense team, push for this speedy trial. A lot of defendants, they just couldn't do that.
It makes you think about justice for all, right? Is it really equal, or do people with money and connections, do they have a leg up?
It's a debate that's been going on forever. In this case, it definitely brings it up again. Also, forces us to look at how we as a society deal with these allegations of sexual misconduct, especially when it's someone famous, someone powerful.
It's about believing victims, supporting survivors, making sure justice isn't, swayed by fame or money.
Exactly. And beyond all that, I think there are some good lessons here about the legal process itself. This whole case, it's like a front row seat to pretrial strategy, how important those disclosures are, that balance between a defendant's rights and the prosecution's, duty to build a strong case.
Like we're watching a law school class play out in real life, huh?
Totally. It also reminds us that, the legal system, it's made up of people. It's got its flaws. It's complicated. The outcome here, it won't just be about facts and evidence, but also personalities, the strategies they use, what the judge decides.
It's like justice isn't always so clear-cut, right? It's nuanced, messy, maybe even a little unpredictable.
Yeah, good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how all these pieces, come together and ultimately how it all ends.
We've covered a lot today, the details of Combs' case and, like you said, what it means for the legal system, for society. But before we go, I want to leave you with this. We know Combs. He wants that speedy trial. Prosecution's resisting. Too complex, they say. But what if, and hear me out, what if there's another reason they want to slow things down? Maybe they're using this time to, I don't know, dig deeper, find more evidence, build an even stronger case, something that goes beyond what we're seeing now. Could there be more to this story?
It's definitely a possibility, something to keep an eye on.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive for today. We took a close look at the Combs case, learned about speedy trials, those crucial pretrial disclosures, and the strategies each side is using. But remember, this is just the beginning. This legal battle, it's going to keep unfolding, and we'll be here to break it all down for you. So stay tuned, keep those legal minds sharp, and remember, justice, it's a journey, not a sprint. We'll catch you next time.